Oh God, that is a dark humor one.
Yes, sir, it is. Yes, sir, it is.
Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity Amplified and Intensified with your host, Eric Taylor, myself, Shiva Maharaj. What's up, dude? We got a lot of things to cut through in 30 minutes or less.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard one to do, to be honest with you, and helpful. My notifications are going off all over the place when I'm talking. I'll shut all that off, but
That's okay. Ransomware's back. Bitcoin's going to go up, and let's kick it off with the Grief ransomware group, who's advising their victims not to hire professionals. And I would assume that means don't go to the authorities as well.
That's correct. That's correct. So, they will say they will quote unquote, burn your data. So essentially what they're trying to say is they're going to delete any of your decryptors that you may have. There's no way you'll be able to recover your files if you actually get encrypted by the Grief Corp ransomware group. But here's one thing that people need to really, really pay attention to. So there's a thing called OFAC, which is,
or as I call the oh fuck list, because if you get on there, oh fuck.
Oh fuck, that's right. So Grief has been touted to be part of Eagle Corporation's many brands, and Eagle Corp is subject to the OFAC list and their sanctions. So here's where the rub really comes in. If you get hit by ReEvil, you pay, oh, not ReEvil, sorry. If you get hit by Grief and you pay, you are subject to IRS backlash when you start filing all your taxes and everything, say that you had to buy cryptocurrency, you had to send it off. This is going to be a major problem for people.
But that's the point of them telling their victims not to go to the authorities and not to go to people like you who handle the incident response. Aside from the fact you guys get what I would consider a significant discount on the ransom if that's the way you have to go. But more so, it's their attempt to subvert the OFAC list. And now, what I think Treasury probably needs to do, and it's hard, it's not an easy fix, is really work on updating that list as quickly as they can. So as soon as these guys start popping up, drop them onto the OFAC list. Now, I don't know what the criteria is to get them on there.
So either you blanket name a company like they've done with Eagle Corp, or they start blacklisting cryptocurrency wallets. But most of the cryptocurrency
that stuff is ephemeral in the sense where kill one, start a new wallet.
Exactly.
Retire Evil Corp, come out as Grief Group. If Grief gets put on the OFAC list, come off as Grief Part 2. Well, there's still a degree of catching up there, right?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So most of the ransomware groups will create a separate wallet per victim. So if you got popped, that wallet that they assign is to your quote unquote case, your ransomware infection. Now, whether they're spinning up, different wallets in Exodus or whatever private, wallets that they have, or they're using a tumbler like we've seen with some of the ransomware groups, but each wallet is designed to that client. So they're able to easily determine who's paid, who hasn't paid, and be able to discern that, because some of the ransomware groups do have a quote unquote automatic payment system. So once you make a payment and their system detects that that currency has gone through, your decryptor is automatically posted on the negotiation page.
That's nice of them.
Yeah, a little streamlined, if you will, a little automation for the IT world, but that's kind of the way that they work. So
what's your unsolicited advice here? Because I'm putting you on the spot. So say whatever disclaimers you need. If someone gets hit by ransomware, should they still come to you or someone like you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you don't know what you don't know, right? So, is it Grief? Is it ReEvil? Is it Dark Side? Or
ReEvil is a thing of the past, though. They just released, Bitdefender just worked out a master decryptor.
Good segue there. So this is the one that I want to, I created a short about this earlier today, but people really need to be really, really, really careful. So, Bitdefender has now released, I think, 3 versions of this thing. There was one earlier this year. There was one tied to Kaseya. And now we have this one. But these are all from before when they supposedly took their servers down. And to note, ReEvil is back up and running as of today. They are getting new victims. They're popping, servers. They're deploying their ransomware. So we have seen in the past, you run a decryptor on a set of encrypted files and it doesn't work naturally, but it will totally fuck your encryption and there's no recovering at all.
I was flipping through the documentation of that Bitdefender decryptor. Apparently, there is an option to back up the files before you attempt decryption.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work? And is that a lesson learned by the ESETs, the Bitdefenders, and all the guys who make these decryptors of what would happen if you use a bad decryptor?
Well, so I'll just give a little nugget out. Never test this thing out on a live production system.
Why not? The best test is production.
Yeah, go live.
MSPs do it every day.
Yeah, I'm going to be here in a minute. I'm going to switch out my CPU while we're doing a live stream. But
there goes Eric.
What does this do? But yeah, I don't know. It's just best practice is sanitation, right? So making sure that you run these things on a hybrid network, or not a hybrid network, but a sandbox system. Make sure this decryptor is working. If it's a VM, spin up a clone of it and see if it'll run. So that way you're not killing your main box. You need to hire a proper incident response firm that will go through these steps of best practices to make sure you don't fuck yourself.
But why? So I'm going to throw something out that I'm sure you've come across in your years doing IR. Clients don't care to test things if it means they can get back up and running sooner. What do you have to say to those clients to get them to understand the risk involved in not testing the decryptor on a test system before going live with it?
I mean, let's be like the same as, you withdraw all your money out of the bank. I rip it into 3 pieces, every bill that you got. And I take that middle piece and walk away with it. That's essentially what you're doing. You're taking a chance of losing everything by running a decryptor that does not work. It's going to try to decrypt it. Even if there is a quote unquote backup mechanism that's built into it, now you have a decryptor that's copying data over that may or may not copy correctly. And I mean, I'm not trying to beat up Bitdefender. They're a really good company. They know they know their shit, right? So, but
aren't they working with less than desired intel? They don't exactly know how they're getting some of these decryptor keys. And I'm assuming it's being leaked by someone in ReEvil. I don't think Bitdefender has been able to reverse engineer the encryption schema.
Probably not. They may, now that, because I posted up the other day on Twitter that, Lockbit 2.0 is, their website. And then you have the decryptor that's 2.1. So this may be where ReEvil has a brand new set of master keys now that they have launched again. And they're just like, whatever for the old guys.
I really think ReEvil, for whatever reason, they took a hiatus, whether it was induced by government agencies, what have you. And the one thing these ransomware guys do that you and I keep talking about is they adapt and overcome. So give out the old stuff. If ReEvil really believes their systems were compromised, especially with the disappearance of their rep unknown, then chalk it up as a loss. Whoever got encrypted, send out the decryptor key, and they're just going to go back in, because chances are they still have persistence into the systems that are going to utilize these decryptor keys.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going anywhere. And
It's not.
I doubt most companies are getting rid of the persistence post-incident unless they have real talent in there helping them, like you or someone of your caliber.
A lot of times we still see companies that will still use the existing, IT person, the MSP that got them into this problem to begin with. It's like, oh, well, they're a good guy. I'm like, yeah, but your good guy fucked you.
Yeah, but you know what? I don't blame technology for any of these incidents. I blame a lack of process. I blame a lack of budget. And I basically blame people because these are self-induced errors, unless it's a 0 day. If it's a 0 day, then I don't want to say it's no one's fault, but it's less likely to be your direct fault.
Exactly.
And take a look at what is it, TTEC?
Mm-hmm.
They got popped recently, and they have been a cesspool of poor IT hygiene for a very long time. It's amazing that it took this long for it to happen, but based on information floating around there, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've got so many clients that are in Europe and South America that are going to be down for weeks, if not.
Dude, forget that. Bank of America is one of their clients.
Yep.
Isn't Bank of America the largest bank by personnel or office locations in the US? Or some version of that?
Yeah. I mean, if they're not the largest, they are definitely one of the largest, right? So
I think they're top 2 in terms of size, but but it is what it is. But my point is, most of these breaches happen because no one's patching quickly enough, and they're overlooking the basics that need to be done to secure things and people.
I think the biggest thing that people are not doing is looking at their logs. Now, I can't tell you how many times.
Get Rocket Cyber.
We're going to go down that dumpster fire today. This is not going to end in 30 minutes.
This is not me recommending. This is not me recommending Rocket Cyber. I do not recommend Rocket Cyber. I do not use Rocket Cyber, other than if I'm trying to make a sarcastic point.
This is true. But yeah, I mean, people need to really start looking at their logs and stuff like that. I mean, most of ransomware attacks, except for the new Microsoft Word garbage that's going on with embedded HTML inside of there, these are through RDP attacks. They're through, all these other attacks that could easily be detected when you're getting brute forced.
So speaking of the Microsoft Office attack vector, how are you mitigating that? Or how are you protecting or warning against something like that, especially with the patches that were released for it on Tuesday?
And they still don't work? Yeah.
If it's anything like Print Nightmare, it's probably the gift that keeps on giving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a new CVE that was reserved earlier this week, and looks like, there is more and more of, Print Nightmare madness that's going on. So you really got to, we talked about this before, but you got to talk to your security vendors that you're using, like CrowdStrike or whoever it is, and make sure that you're building out IOCs for these detectors.
That's technical. You and I know to do that. Hopefully, end customers and clients who listen to this podcast will understand you need to have a strong technical bench behind you. But how do you convey that to the business owner to understand what's at stake here?
It's a hard one because a lot of people will be like, well, we have a firewall. Everything is stopped with a firewall.
Not if you stop patching it in 2018.
But still, they think the firewall will stop everything. I hear more and more that people think that that's their saving grace, is a firewall.
Firewalls are great, but it's not the end all be all. I think you and I would agree on that.
Mm-hmm. And if they get past the firewall, don't worry. We got WebRoot as our AV. So we're good.
Piss and vinegar day. I like it.
You started with Rocket Cyber.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Okay. Let's talk 0 day here. The Microsoft Azure Cloud 0 day that allows administrative access to thousands upon thousands of accounts. It's seemingly been closed. This is the 3rd in 2 months, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I'm mistaken here.
Yeah, it's quite a number of them. There's been a lot of data leaks that's been going on from, Azure. And from everything that I'm reading, these are a lot of, even this one is, the Wiz research from a road execution of the RCE. I haven't dug into this one a whole lot, but on the surface, it's definitely looked like more and more misconfigurations, not properly putting in a configuration the way you're supposed to. So when I say that, I say it a little loosely. It's like, all right, you're putting, let's just say a control set has five things you got to do to fully lock it down. Like when you're going to bed, you're going to make sure your front door is locked, your back door is locked, your garage door is.
People still do that?
Yeah. Maybe your alarm system is set, but most of the time your alarm system doesn't monitor your garage door. So they may
to you, mix your gear. It will. Maybe not for you, but for MSOs.
Yeah.
I'd like me to ask Vince that on Monday.
There you go. For those who don't know, we're going to be talking to Dark Cube again on our next episode. So make sure you subscribe. It's a good plug for that. But yeah, I mean, they don't go through all the controls and make sure that 100% it's locked down. So
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
With all of the RCEs that have been released within the last 6 months or year to date, how many of these are being ceded to us by government agencies for fear of bad actors using what they've probably been using for years?
I don't know. I mean, you made the comment a minute ago. We still see people who have Fortinet firewalls or FortiGate firewalls from 3 years ago being actively exploited. It does. I mean, while it's a good concept, it's like, okay, the NSA, CIA, whatever, are leaking these things out to help secure.
And let's not limit it to our intelligence agencies. You got them around the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just us, but I think there comes a time where the threats are so quickly realized that these agencies have no choice but to inform the vendors, hey, this is how people can get in. And how they inform them, I have no idea. But you got to plug them, because if it can be used by you, it can be used by anyone else. Look at, remember Juniper Networks?
Yep.
They put in the back door for, I think it was the NSA.
Mm-hmm.
And foreign intelligence breached it, reconstructed the keys, and for 3 years, federal agencies were laid bare.
Yep.
So, I mean, what are we going to do here?
I mean, you just got to be diligent. It's really all there is to it, and if you can't, talk to one of us or somebody you can actually trust.
Okay, I'm happy you brought that up. How do business owners or people who own the risk of IT in a company vet their IT providers to make sure they have the talent to do what's needed, or the process, procedure, whatever you want to call it, other than calling you or I?
Ask questions. And then when you're asking questions, ask them to prove it. You and I, a little bit of, what's been going on behind the scenes, but, when the Microsoft Word exploit was coming out, I was spinning up variants of this, running it against Bitdefender, running it against Sophos and Blackpoint Cyber and CrowdStrike, and doing different variations of all these things and recording this. I'm still debating if I'm going to put that up on YouTube or not, but
do it.
But, this is the things that you got to do. You ask them to prove what they are doing. If nothing else, have them spin up a VM, drop a payload in there with your protections in place that you're providing, or that your technology provider is giving you, and have them show you that it's actively protecting and is sending off alerts. If nothing else, they should be able to easily do that stuff, and most can't.
One of the things I noticed from you specifically when you've been doing this, if you are mixing vendors, there will be a blame game and a finger pointing exercise where every vendor who missed it will say, well, another vendor picked it up, so we were unable to see it. I'm not going to name names here.
Yeah, I thought we were going to go, okay. So
all right.
I figured that's where the line was.
I'm not going to name names, but when you're telling me you got the goods, but another agent on the computer stopped it so you can't even see it, that doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it less actionable.
Yeah, there's a whole thing. I really, really, really wish that we could go down that whole treasure trove of information. But yeah, in a nutshell, there is an EDR platform that's out there that if your tenant is not configured for I guess you configure a tenant for a specific AV package that you're deploying. And if your tenant is configured for a different one, like we were using it for testing, and it catches it, that EDR solution that that vendor is providing as a bolt-on will not detect it. And they're just like, oh, we're a little dark over here. And I'm like, really?
I don't think that's true. I just think they missed it. I don't think they were looking for it.
Yeah.
Because an EDR is an EDR, right? You're going to pick up on what is there.
Mm-hmm.
We have a colleague who came over to our preferred EDR solution of CrowdStrike this week. And this person came over because there was an incident, well, a benign incident, or there was a alert that popped up and Bitdefender never saw it. And the reason Bitdefender never saw it is because it is not a canned alert. So their EDR was worthless to go back in to investigate. And we told this colleague of ours, with CrowdStrike, you're searching raw data.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to trigger an alert for it to be there and be searchable. That's
correct. Yeah, a lot of EDRs are that way. So unless there's a triggerable, that's a hard word, an alert that was triggered, let's try it that way. There's nothing to parse data off of. And we see that with a lot of EDRs.
Here's where I'm going to turn into an asshole. What's the point of an EDR if it's not a defined alert and you can't go back in to search for it? That's not an EDR.
Well, I think that's part of the D of EDR, of detection.
Okay, but correct me if I'm wrong here. To me, an EDR is a platform that is continuously monitoring the logs and capturing logs and events and happenings on a system so that if something does happen, you can go back in to search those logs and events to create a detection or at least gain intelligence into what happened.
Correct. So there's two mindsets, right? And that's just kind of why we are with CrowdStrike and some of the other partners.
And my mindset is always right sometimes.
Sometimes of all the time. But an EDR is, there's really two things. So if there's nothing detected, there's nothing to report on, there's nothing to search on, which is true. But to your point, and this is kind of why we changed from where we are, if there is a new threat, if there is something that's not detected, but we need to find out if it was. So like, all these new IOCs that we're talking about that are being dropped and we're pulling them from thread feeds and things of that nature, Bitdefender may not detect it right away, but if it's been going on for the past 30 days, with at least CrowdStrike, we can go back in and say, okay, we need to build up algorithms and everything like that.
Let me ask you a question here. Asshole coming in hot.
Strapped in.
How the hell are you building an IOC with Bitdefender if you can't search for the goddamn event when a firewall flagged it?
You can't.
So what's the point?
It didn't detect, so there's nothing to search.
That's my point. So can we, at least for our little world of two in this podcast, define an EDR as something that gives me visibility into logs going back a certain amount of time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm done for now.
Or if nothing else, maybe you can at least have, a SIM that's tied to your workstation. There's got to be some way to.
But there's no artifact. There's no artifact to track. So if you're using that Bitdefender EDR to rely on having that artifact, you're going to miss out on it unless you put your SIM's agent to pull all the logs to search.
Yeah, I was saying, if you're going to use a Bitdefender, if you're going to use, one of these other Sentinel ones or whatever, you're going to have a third application that's pulling workstation, server, all these other logs to aggregate and start going back and be able to find those IOCs.
So we're going to increase the threat surface area because of the inadequacies of other products. Fantastic. Okay. I like it. That's fantastic. Let's do this.
Onward and upward.
If you're using the right EDR, or what I would call an actionable EDR. That one goes out to you, Brian. What's next on the hot topics of debate today? Because I can sit here and shit on Bitdefender all day for that particular incident.
Yeah, that one had you riled up for a while there. That was a good 36 hours at least.
Dude,
I know.
I failed.
I totally agree. 1,000% agree. I guess the last one, just to try to be respectful of time, because we are trying to keep this under 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But, there's been numerous, I think even as of today or yesterday or whatever, there was another exchange exploit that was put out, and Microsoft's just kind of throwing up their hands. They're like, yeah, whatever, move to the cloud. But, there are certain industries that will never move to the cloud fully. Not every client's going to go pure Azure AD or anything like that. But, I did see this come out earlier this month where people, I guess, have come to Microsoft is like, hey, how do we clean up our AD if it's no longer used? And I'm like, do people not do this?
This pisses me off.
Yeah.
Go ahead, and then I'll open up my can of Stone Cold's whoop ass.
This is really, I would have thought, at least from my world, and I guess maybe it's just because we're canned in our own little environment, but you would think if you're deprecating certain roles and functions inside of your domain, that you would remove everything that's not applicable, like reducing your attack surface or your threat landscape or whatever the case is. So you're going to have.
But Eric, we upgraded to Office 365. Why do we need to do this?
Because you're potentially leaving still a backdoor. You don't know how many times I still got, ECP logins available for an old deprecated Exchange server.
But there's nothing wrong with leaving the Exchange admin there for and available for everyone to use.
Yeah, because it doesn't tie into your domain controller at all.
Not at all. And it doesn't leave Kerberos tickets around like no other.
So yeah, we'll put the link in this into the sources of the podcast. There's definitely a PowerShell script on GitHub that Microsoft put out for you to, go through and clean up your freaking Active Directory. Please, for the love of people, start going through and cleaning up your environment. Crap. I can't tell you how many times pen testers like me go through and start finding old legacy stuff that was just left around because you forgot to sanitize your shit.
I see a proliferation of pen testing coming about just to mitigate the stupidity of deprecating on-prem systems and moving to the cloud.
Not only that, but insurance companies are starting to really, really require more and more pen testing to be done.
Yeah, but I can look at a sheet of paper and call it a pen test and they'll say, okay.
This is true.
Not really, but you get where I'm going with that. So
exactly. So you said you had some comments on this whole AD issue. What are your comments on it?
I just think it's kind of stupid that people are moving on-prem assets and resources into a cloud-based system and not deprecating the old logins. The fact that people are doing that makes them a trunk slammer. Doesn't make them an IT professional, at least in my book. But I started this thing. Well, I didn't start this thing. I'm not Al Gore. I started in the IT world where you actually needed to know what you were doing as opposed to being able to Google it, go on Reddit or a Slack group to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why I kind of believe in process and procedure. But hey, what do I know?
Yeah, we made the comment before. I'm not sure if it was on a podcast or just in our own private conversations where, the whole MSP is crowdsourced technology or troubleshooting and everything like that, because the amount of Reddit groups and Facebook groups and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, holy crap,
That's why they always talk about the MSP community. It's crowdsourced support.
Yeah.
There's no barrier to entry. Not that there's a barrier to entry in any part of IT other than programming, I guess. But it is what it is. Like, I'm done. I'm not even done. I never started. I'm not into raising the tide. I am into me and the people I surround myself with being better and doing better.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So
with that, I am done for the day.
Hey, we're going to maybe do the 30-minute Mitch Park. This is awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for tuning in for yet another episode of Amplified and Intensified, the weekly podcast that we talk about some of the security threats. If you found this valuable and want to share, please do that. Find us on amplifiedintensified.com. If you have any questions, comments, or anything else you want to talk to us about, send us an email at info@amplifiedintensified.com and check us out on YouTube at youtube.barricadecyber.com. And until next time, take care.